So, you know, the newspaper part of our media constellation does not get away from this unscathed. One major newspaper, the Washington Post, which in many ways is the worst because it's in Washington, left Ron Paul's name out of its article. Now, just to be clear, in the case of the Green Room on ABC, in the case of the Washington Post, these things can't happen by accident. We need to be 100% clear about this. They can't. Because in the case of a television news show, it's very heavily produced. You have lots of people, even if somebody makes a mistake. You've seen this happen many times when someone's on television and they're talking, you know, a news anchor or a reporter or whatever, and they make a mistake. They leave something out, they say something wrong. You know, within 5 or 10 minutes, they come back on with like a big smile. Oh, we're really sorry, I misspoke, such and such is the case. And newspapers are even more carefully edited than that. So someone made a decision to leave Ron Paul's name out. Now, I'm just going to tell you about a few other things, and then we'll move into why I think this is happening, what may happen in the future, what can be done about it. But let me just give you a couple of more examples. Let's go back again to ABC, and sad to say, I mean, ABC has been by far the worst in this. And on the other end, CNN, MSNBC, and CBS have been by and large okay. None of them have been perfect, but MSNBC, for example, at the very beginning, when Ron Paul first started doing well in these post-debate polls, there was an exchange between Keith Olbermann and Chris Matthews in which they were somewhat sarcastic about it, but by and large, MSNBC has been fine. Well, here's what happened with ABC also in August last month. There was a radio show, and I don't know if any of you listened to it. It's actually produced and situated primarily right here in New York City on WABC, part of the afternoon lineup. Mark Levin. I'm ashamed to say he almost has the same name that I do. I'm ashamed to say because I don't want to be associated with this guy in any way, as you'll see in a second. The radio show, though, is not just in New York. It's nationally syndicated on ABC's network. And this isn't an example of misreporting. This is an example of propaganda taken right out of Joseph Goebbels' handbook. And you might ask, who is Joseph Goebbels? Well, we're going to get to him later on in the term as well. He was Adolf Hitler's minister of propaganda. That was literally his title. And what Goebbels said is when you want to oppose someone, you don't just come right out face to face and have a debate with the person because you might not do that well. Goebbels was a very smart guy. He had a PhD from the University of Heidelberg, so he was no dummy. Unfortunately, he uses intelligence for evil. But one of the things that Goebbels says, if you want to undermine someone that you don't agree with, you try to make their supporters lose confidence in the person that they're supporting. You try to work underneath and make the person's supporters feel that it's a hopeless task, that they don't have a chance. And that's a very good way, Goebbels said, of overcoming an enemy that you might disagree with. So with that in mind, let's look at what Mark Levin said to his listeners on a fine August afternoon just last month. He said, he's sick and tired of hearing all this about Ron Paul, and it's complete nonsense. And he urged his listeners to call up Ron Paul headquarters as often as they could and basically say, your candidate has no chance of winning. You didn't speak to me when you were talking about the polls. And Mark Levin's idea was that if he could get enough people to call up Ron Paul's headquarters, that somehow it would make the campaign lose hope. Frankly, it's a stupid idea. I don't know why he thought anyone would really take that seriously, but that's not the point. The point is, what is a radio commentator doing urging listeners to basically conduct what we would today call a disinformation campaign, or what Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's minister of propaganda, would call a propagandistic campaign? And is it a coincidence that it took place again on an ABC franchise? And if ABC as a corporation was against this, which I hope they were, I didn't hear anything, why didn't they fire this guy? He's still on the air. Well, let me just say one other thing about ABC, and then we'll talk about Fox, who has not been doing a very good job in this either. And I'll resist saying I was less surprised about Fox. Well, I guess I didn't resist saying it, I just said it. But, I was more surprised about ABC than Fox. But one other thing about ABC, to show that they are an equal opportunity abuser of freedom of the press, Dennis Kucinich is running for president. He's a Democrat. He has some similarities to Ron Paul. Ron Paul thinks the war in Iraq is unconstitutional and we should withdraw immediately. Kucinich feels the same way and voted against the war. And I guess, I don't know if that's what it was that got ABC's ire, but once again, there was a photograph that was taken about a month ago, this time of the Democratic candidates, and you know how they're all standing there. And guess what? Poor Kucinich is cropped out of the photograph. So were someone to look at that photograph, again, on an ABC.com website, no Dennis Kucinich. I mean, I just don't get it. Where do they get off doing that? ABC thinks Kucinich is not an important enough candidate. Who cares what they think, right? They're supposed to report, not basically mold stories to their liking. And before I get to Fox, let me just say a little bit about the First Amendment, because you'll hear me during this course, and you'll see in one of the assigned texts, the soft edge, that I am a staunch defender of the First Amendment. In fact, I think the First Amendment has to be interpreted in an absolute 100% fashion, meaning that when it says, Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech or the press, I think the phrase no law means just that. So I think the FCC is unconstitutional. The FCC tries to regulate broadcasters, and I think any attempt of the government to dictate anything whatsoever to any organ of the press is unconstitutional. Were I president, which of course I'll never be, I don't know if it would be my very first act, but by the end of the first day I would fire everyone in the FCC. Anyhow, my point is, however, that I think the media are entitled to this level of protection from the government. Thomas Jefferson thought that. So did James Madison and James Monroe, our founding fathers who drafted the First Amendment. But I think the media have a responsibility.